Reclaiming your power through non-reaction is an act of immense self-control and emotional intelligence. When someone hurts you, the initial reaction might be to lash out, to defend yourself, or to retaliate with equal intensity. But in that moment of reaction, what we often don't realize is that we're handing over our power to the person who caused the hurt. They have the ability to trigger an emotional response in us to dictate how we feel and act. By reacting impulsively, we are allowing ourselves to be driven by external forces, by someone else's actions, words, or behavior. Choosing not to react, however, is about shifting the dynamics of that interaction. It's about recognizing that while you cannot control what someone does to you, you can control how you respond. This control is where your true power lies. It's the difference between living reactively at the mercy of external circumstances and living proactively, grounded in your own emotional and mental stability. When you make the conscious decision to not react, you reclaim your power by choosing not to be swayed by someone else's behavior. You are saying, I will not allow your actions to determine my emotions. I control my state of mind. This approach requires a high level of self-awareness. You have to be able to recognize when your emotions are taking over, when the hurt is clouding your judgment, and when the urge to react is overpowering. But instead of acting on that impulse, you take a step back. You pause. In that pause, you create space to breathe, to reflect, to process. This space is where you begin to take back control. In this space, you can decide what's worth your energy and what's not. More often than not, you'll find that reacting impulsively isn't worth it. The satisfaction of a quick comeback or a defensive response is fleeting, but the repercussions can linger. Reclaiming your power is not about pretending that the hurt doesn't exist or ignoring your emotions. It's about acknowledging them without allowing them to control your behavior. It's about understanding that your emotions are valid, but they do not need to be expressed in ways that diminish your sense of control or dignity. Non-reaction doesn't mean you're suppressing your feelings. Rather, it's an act of emotional mastery. It's choosing to feel the hurt, recognize the anger or sadness, but not let those emotions dictate how you act in the moment. Moreover, by choosing not to react, you shift the power dynamic in the situation. When someone expects a reaction and doesn't get one, it disarms them. It removes their ability to control or manipulate the situation. This is particularly important when dealing with people who may intentionally seek to provoke you or bring out a negative response. In these cases, your non-reaction is a message that says that their actions have no control over you, that you are centered in your own emotional strength. By remaining calm, composed, and non-reactive, you maintain the upper hand. You show that you are not easily swayed, that your peace of mind is more important than engaging in an emotional tug of war. This kind of self-control also helps protect your long-term emotional well-being. Every time you choose not to react, you reinforce the message to yourself that you are in control. You're practicing resilience and fortifying your ability to stay grounded in difficult situations. Over time, this builds emotional endurance and mental strength that allows you to face hurtful situations with clarity and composure. Instead of being drained by negative interactions, you can move through them with grace, knowing that you didn't let the situation overpower you. Ultimately, reclaiming your power through non-reaction is about freedom from the emotional roller coaster that comes with reacting to every hurt, every slight, every provocation. The space between stimulus and response is where true personal growth happens. In that momentary pause between something happening to you and your reaction to it lies the power to choose your response, and in that choice lies your freedom. Most of the time, we move through life reacting to situations almost instinctively. A harsh word triggers anger, a disappointment triggers sadness, and before we know it, our emotions have already determined how we respond. But what if we could catch that fleeting moment before the reaction and use it to our advantage? The space between stimulus and response may seem small, but it is vast with possibilities. It's the difference between reacting with impulse and responding with intention. When someone hurts you, whether with words, actions, or even their silence, your emotions rush to the surface. Your body tenses, your heart rate quickens, and your mind immediately searches for ways to protect itself. In that heightened emotional state, it's easy to react impulsively, often in ways that escalate the situation or lead to regret later. But in the space between the hurt and the reaction, there is an opportunity to stop, to breathe, and to consciously decide how to respond. This pause, however brief, is a powerful tool. It allows you to step back from the emotional surge and examine what is really happening. Instead of letting your emotions dictate your behavior, you regain control. You become an observer of your own emotions rather than a victim to them. This space gives you clarity, and with clarity comes better decision making. Instead of lashing out in anger, you might choose to respond with calmness. Instead of retreating into hurt, you might choose to speak from a place of vulnerability or understanding. The choice is yours, but you can only make it if you give yourself the gift of that pause. In that space, you also have time to assess the situation more clearly. Often, our initial emotional reactions are based on assumptions or misunderstandings. We interpret someone's words or actions through the lens of our own emotions, which can distort reality. But in the space between stimulus and response, you can ask yourself important questions. Is what I'm feeling justified? Am I reacting to the situation as it is or as I perceive it? Is this worth my emotional energy? By taking the time to reflect, you gain a clearer understanding of the situation and avoid the pitfalls of reacting based on incomplete or inaccurate information. Moreover, this space is where emotional regulation happens. Our emotions, while powerful, are not fixed. They are fluid, changing moment by moment. If we react immediately to a stimulus, we're often reacting from the peak of our emotional intensity. But if we give ourselves time, if we allow ourselves to sit in that space, the intensity of the emotion may subside. Anger cools, hurt softens, and what once seemed like a critical issue may not feel as urgent. The ability to regulate our emotions in this way is a mark of emotional maturity, and it's something we can practice and strengthen with time. The space between stimulus and response is also where we can reconnect with our values. In moments of hurt or anger, it's easy to lose sight of who we are and what we stand for. We get caught up in the heat of the moment and may act in ways that are not aligned with our core principles. But in that space, we can pause and ask ourselves, what kind of person do I want to be in this situation? Do I want to respond with kindness, or do I want to mirror the hurt that was done to me? Do I want to maintain my integrity, or do I want to compromise it in a moment of emotional reactivity? By taking a step back, we can make choices that reflect the person we strive to be, rather than letting the situation dictate our actions. Additionally, this space allows for greater empathy and understanding. When someone hurts us, our instinct is often to see them as the enemy. We focus on our own pain and forget that the other person may also be acting from a place of hurt, fear, or confusion. In the space between stimulus and response, we have the opportunity to consider the other person's perspective. We can ask ourselves why they might have acted the way they did. We can remember that people's behavior is often a reflection of their own internal struggles, and that their hurtful actions may have more to do with them than with us. This doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it does help us approach the situation with more compassion and less reactivity. It's also in this space that we learn to let go of the need for control. Often our reactions are attempts to control the situation, to make things right, or to protect ourselves from further harm. But the truth is, we can't control other people's actions or feelings. What we can control is how we respond. By embracing the space between stimulus and response, we accept that while we may not have control over what happens to us, we do have control over how we handle it. This acceptance can be liberating. It frees us from the constant need to manage and manipulate external circumstances and allows us to focus on what we can control: our own thoughts, emotions, and actions. This space is a practice of mindfulness. It's about being fully present in the moment, aware of our emotions without being overwhelmed by them. When we cultivate this practice, we become better equipped to handle life's challenges with grace and poise. We learn that our initial emotional reactions are not the final say, they are just the starting point. What matters most is what we do in the space that follows. Silence speaks louder than words. In a world that constantly values noise, whether through verbal expression, social media, or even the pressure to respond to every situation, there is a profound strength in choosing to stay silent. Silence is often misunderstood as weakness, as passivity, or as a lack of response. But in reality, silence can be one of the most powerful forms of communication. It is a deliberate, intentional choice, one that communicates more than words ever could. When someone hurts you or when you find yourself in a difficult situation, the natural instinct is to speak up, to defend yourself, to make your case known. But sometimes choosing not to respond at all, allowing your silence to do the talking, says more than any words could ever convey. There is an elegance in silence, a dignity that cannot be replicated through verbal retaliation. When you remain silent in the face of provocation or pain, you are exercising control over the situation. Instead of getting caught up in the emotional chaos that often follows hurtful interactions, you create a space of calm. This calm is not only for yourself, but also for the other person involved. Silence forces people to sit with the weight of their words or actions without the distraction of an immediate reaction from you. They have no defense to latch onto, no counter-argument to engage in, and no escalation to feed off of. Silence can disarm even the most hurtful of individuals because it leaves them with only their own behavior to reflect upon. Moreover, silence speaks to your confidence and self-assuredness. It sends the message that you do not need to defend yourself or explain yourself. You are secure enough in your own truth that you don't feel the need to convince others of it. When you refrain from reacting, you show that their words or actions do not have power over you. You refuse to give them the satisfaction of seeing you rattled or affected. Silence is a shield, not a surrender. It's a way of protecting your peace, of choosing not to let someone else's negativity invade your emotional space. In this way, silence is not passive at all. It's an active decision to prioritize your own well-being over the temptation to engage in conflict. Silence also carries a certain mystery. In the absence of a response, people are left wondering what you're thinking, how you're feeling, and what you'll do next. This unpredictability can be incredibly powerful. When people expect a reaction and don't get one, they are forced to fill in the gaps themselves. In many cases, their own imagination of what you might be thinking or planning can be far more impactful than anything you could have said. Silence leaves room for introspection, for them to question their own behavior, their own motives, and their own role in the situation. It invites a deeper level of reflection than a heated exchange ever could. Silence, in many ways, is also about restraint. It takes incredible strength to hold back when you've been hurt, to resist the urge to lash out or defend yourself. But this restraint is not about suppressing your emotions or ignoring your feelings. It's about channeling them in a way that doesn't contribute to more harm. It's about recognizing that not every situation requires a verbal response, that sometimes silence is the most appropriate and powerful answer. When you choose silence, you are not denying your pain or minimizing your experience. Instead, you are exercising emotional discipline. You are choosing to rise above the immediate emotions and take a longer view of the situation. There is also a healing power in silence. Words, once spoken, cannot be taken back. In moments of hurt, it's easy to say things in the heat of the moment that we later regret. Silence gives you the time and space to process your emotions, to reflect on what's really important, and to respond, if needed, from a place of clarity rather than a place of hurt. In this sense, silence is not just about what you choose not to say, it's about what you are protecting for the future. By staying silent in the present, you are preserving your ability to speak from a place of integrity later on. You are ensuring that when you do choose to use your voice, it will be grounded in thoughtfulness and wisdom rather than reactionary emotion. Furthermore, silence can communicate boundaries. When someone hurts you and you choose to remain silent, you are sending a message that their behavior is not worthy of your energy or attention. You are signaling that you will not be drawn into their negativity, that you refuse to engage in toxic dynamics. This form of silence is not about avoidance, it's about self-preservation. It's about asserting that your emotional well-being is more important than winning an argument or proving a point. In this way, silence becomes a form of self-respect. It's a way of saying, I value my peace too much to let this disrupt it. There's also a wisdom in knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. Not every situation requires a response. Sometimes silence is the best response because it allows you to observe, to gather information, and to make more informed decisions later on. Silence gives you the space to assess the situation without being clouded by the need to react immediately. It allows you to see the bigger picture, to understand the dynamics at play, and to choose your next steps with intention. This kind of deliberate silence is not about avoiding confrontation, it's about choosing the right time and the right way to engage. By staying silent in the moment, you create the opportunity for a more thoughtful and constructive response when the time is right. Finally, silence is a form of strength. It shows that you are not controlled by your emotions, that you are capable of withstanding hurt without being knocked off course. It demonstrates a deep sense of inner security, of knowing that your worth is not determined by how others treat you or what they say to you. When you remain silent in the face of hurt, you are asserting that your value comes from within, not from external validation or approval. This kind of strength is not loud or flashy, but it is incredibly powerful. It is the kind of strength that allows you to move through life with grace, even in the most challenging of situations. Breaking the cycle of hurt is one of the most profound acts of emotional strength and self-awareness that a person can commit to. When we experience pain, whether it's through the actions or words of others, there's a natural, almost instinctive desire to pass that pain along. Hurt people, as the saying goes, and it's easy to see why. When you're wounded, especially by someone you trusted or cared for, the emotions that surface, anger, frustration, betrayal, can become overwhelming. These feelings often push us to react, to defend, to retaliate, to make sure the person who hurt us feels the weight of their actions. But what if, instead of perpetuating that cycle, we stopped it? What if we chose not to pass along the pain? What if we decided that the hurt stops here? The decision to break the cycle of hurt requires a deep level of emotional awareness and maturity. It's a choice that says, I won't let what has been done to me define what I do to others. This is not an easy path. It requires us to confront our own pain and sit with it rather than pushing it outward. It requires us just to process the hurt in a way that is constructive rather than destructive. But in doing so, we not only heal ourselves, but we also prevent that hurt from spreading to others. Breaking the cycle means choosing a different way of being, one that prioritizes healing over hurting, growth over retaliation, and love over resentment. When someone hurts us, there's often a feeling of powerlessness that accompanies the pain. We didn't ask to be hurt, we didn't deserve it, and yet here we are dealing with the fallout. Reacting, especially through anger or spite, can feel like reclaiming some of that lost power. But in reality, reacting out of hurt only reinforces that powerlessness. It places control of your emotions in someone else's hands, allowing their actions to dictate your responses. Breaking the cycle means taking back control. It means saying, I will not be ruled by the actions of others. I will decide how I respond to this in this way. Breaking the cycle is an act of empowerment, a way of reclaiming your autonomy and your emotional sovereignty. Breaking the cycle of hurt also requires a deep sense of empathy, both for yourself and for others. It's about recognizing that hurt often comes from a place of pain, misunderstanding, or fear. This doesn't excuse hurtful behavior, but it does help us understand that reacting in kind doesn't solve the problem, it perpetuates it. Empathy allows us to see beyond the immediate hurt and into the deeper causes. It allows us to respond with compassion rather than anger, with understanding rather than judgment. When we can empathize with the person who hurt us, even if only to recognize that their actions came from a place of their own unresolved pain, we can start to break the cycle. This doesn't mean allowing ourselves to be mistreated or accepting hurtful behavior. Breaking the cycle isn't about being passive or turning the other cheek in a way that diminishes our own worth. It's about setting boundaries and recognizing that we have the power to choose how we respond to hurt. It's about refusing to let someone else's actions dictate our emotional landscape. We can still hold people accountable for their actions without perpetuating the cycle of hurt. Accountability and compassion can coexist. Breaking the cycle means we acknowledge the pain but choose not to pass it on. Another key aspect of breaking the cycle is self-care and self-compassion. Often when we're hurt, our focus shifts entirely to the other person, their actions, their motives, their behavior. But breaking the cycle starts with us. It starts with acknowledging our own pain, validating our own feelings, and giving ourselves the time and space to heal. We can't break the cycle if we're constantly pushing our emotions down or ignoring them. The pain we don't face becomes the pain we pass on. Breaking the cycle means committing to our own healing, recognizing that it's okay to feel hurt, and giving ourselves permission to process that pain in a healthy way. Forgiveness is another crucial element in breaking the cycle of hurt. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It doesn't mean condoning someone else's behavior or letting them off the hook. Instead, forgiveness is about releasing the grip that the hurt has on us. It's about letting go of the anger, the resentment, and the desire for revenge that keep us stuck in the cycle of pain. When we forgive, we free ourselves from the emotional weight of the hurt. We allow ourselves to move forward without carrying the baggage of the past. Forgiveness is not something we do for the person who hurt us, it's something we do for ourselves. Breaking the cycle of hurt also involves a commitment to vulnerability. It's easy to close ourselves off after being hurt, to build walls to protect ourselves from future pain. But in doing so, we also shut ourselves off from the possibility of connection, of love, of healing. Vulnerability requires us to stay open even in the face of hurt. It requires us to trust that we can handle the pain without becoming consumed by it. It requires us to believe that we are strong enough to remain open-hearted, even after being wounded. Vulnerability is not weakness, it's the ultimate form of strength. It says, I will not let this pain close me off, I will remain open. Because that's where true healing lies. At its core, breaking the cycle of hurt is about choosing love over fear. Hurt often stems from fear of being unloved, fear of being rejected, fear of not being enough. When we react out of hurt, we're often acting from that place of fear. But breaking the cycle means choosing love instead. It means loving ourselves enough to not let someone else's actions define our worth. It means loving others enough to see their humanity even when they hurt us. And it means loving the world enough to believe that breaking the cycle of hurt is possible, that we can create a world where pain is not passed down from one person to the next, but where it stops with us. Breaking the cycle of hurt is a radical act of courage. It goes against the grain of what we've been taught about pain and power. It asks us to rise above our immediate emotions and take a longer view of the situation. It asks us to prioritize healing over retaliation, to choose growth over bitterness, and to commit to a path of love and compassion even in the face of hurt. It's not easy, but it's worth it. Because when we break the cycle of hurt, we not only heal ourselves, we create a ripple effect that extends far beyond us. We make the world a little bit kinder, a little bit softer, and a little bit more loving. And that ultimately is the power of breaking the cycle of hurt. Emotional resilience is the strength that allows us to withstand life's challenges without being emotionally battered by them. It's about finding an internal steadiness, a calm center, even in the midst of external turmoil. One of the most powerful expressions of emotional resilience is non-reaction. It's the ability to experience something difficult, be it an insult, a betrayal, or a disappointment, and not react in the moment. Non-reaction doesn't mean that we are unaffected by what happens, but it means we choose how to respond. We create a space between the stimulus and our response, a space where we can decide how to act rather than simply reacting on impulse. And in that space lies a remarkable power, the power to control our own emotional state. Non-reaction is also a form of emotional intelligence. It's the ability to understand our emotions, to recognize what's driving them, and to manage them in a way that aligns with our values and goals. Emotional intelligence is not about denying our feelings, it's about understanding them and using that understanding to guide our actions. When we practice non-reaction, we are tapping into that emotional intelligence. We are recognizing that just because we feel hurt doesn't mean we need to lash out. Just because we feel angry doesn't mean we need to retaliate. Emotional resilience gives us the wisdom to see the bigger picture, to understand that our immediate emotional response is not the final word on the situation. One of the greatest gifts of non-reaction is that it allows us to stay in control of our own emotional landscape. When we react impulsively, we are often giving away that control. We are letting the actions of others dictate how we feel and how we respond. But when we choose non-reaction, we are reclaiming that control. We are saying, I decide how I feel. I decide how I respond. This doesn't mean we suppress our feelings or ignore them. It means we take the time to process them in a way that serves us. We don't allow someone else's actions to hijack our emotional state. Instead, we stay grounded in our own sense of self, our own values, and our own emotional resilience. Non-reaction also offers us the opportunity to break patterns of behavior that may not serve us. Often we react in certain ways because we've been conditioned to do so. We may have learned consciously or unconsciously that reacting with anger or defensiveness is the way to protect ourselves. But emotional resilience invites us to question those patterns. It asks us, is this reaction really serving me? Is this how I want to engage with the world? Non-reaction allows us to pause and make different choices. It allows us to respond in ways that are aligned with our highest self, rather than being driven by old habits or emotional conditioning. Another powerful aspect of non-reaction is that it gives us the space to respond with empathy and understanding. When we're caught up in our own emotional reactivity, it's hard to see beyond our own hurt. We become focused on defending ourselves, on making sure we're heard, or on proving the other person wrong. But when we practice non-reaction, we create the space to step back and consider the other person's perspective. We might realize that their hurtful behavior is coming from a place of their own pain or insecurity. We might recognize that their actions are not really about us, but about something they're struggling with. Non-reaction allows us to tap into our capacity for empathy and compassion, which can lead to more constructive, healing interactions. Emotional resilience through non-reaction also builds our confidence. It shows us that we don't have to be ruled by our emotions or by the actions of others. It reminds us that we are capable of handling difficult situations without losing our sense of self. Each time we practice non-reaction, we strengthen our emotional muscles. We become more confident in our ability to navigate life's challenges without being derailed by them. This confidence doesn't come from denying our emotions, but from knowing that we can feel them without being overwhelmed by them. Non-reaction is not about passivity or inaction, it's about intentionality. It's about choosing how we want to engage with the world, rather than letting the world dictate our reactions. Emotional resilience means we can stand in the midst of chaos, in the midst of hurt or provocation, and still choose how we respond. It's a form of strength that is both gentle and powerful. Non-reaction allows us to engage with life from a place of calm, clarity, and compassion, rather than from a place of reactivity and defensiveness. It's a gift we give to ourselves and ultimately to those around us as well. choosing peace over conflict is a powerful, deliberate decision that can transform not only our relationships, but also our inner world. It's a recognition that conflict, while often unavoidable, doesn't have to define how we engage with others or how we navigate challenges. Choosing peace isn't about avoiding difficult conversations or pretending that everything is fine when it's not. It's about deciding that no matter what happens, we won't let anger, resentment, or the desire to be right take control of our actions. It's the conscious effort to prioritize harmony and understanding over division and discord, even when we feel hurt or misunderstood. In moments of conflict, the temptation to react, to defend ourselves, or to argue our point can be overwhelming. We may feel justified in our anger or hurt, and it's natural to want to protect ourselves from perceived threats. But when we choose peace, we recognize that these immediate reactions, while human, are not always in our best interest. They often escalate the situation, creating more harm than resolution. Choosing peace means pausing in those moments of intensity, taking a breath, and reminding ourselves of the bigger picture. It's about asking ourselves, what outcome do I really want here? Is this argument worth sacrificing my peace of mind? When we choose peace over conflict, we are not dismissing our own needs or invalidating our feelings. Instead, we are choosing a path that honors our emotional well-being while also considering the well-being of others. It's an acknowledgement that the energy we invest in conflict could be better spent on finding solutions, fostering understanding, and building stronger connections. This doesn't mean that we avoid addressing problems or suppress our emotions, but that we approach them from a place of calm and clarity rather than anger or frustration. By doing so, we open the door to more meaningful and productive conversations where both parties feel heard and valued. There is immense strength in choosing peace, especially in moments where conflict feels like the easier path. It takes courage to walk away from an argument, to let go of the need to prove a point, and to focus on resolution rather than victory. In a world that often glorifies confrontation and competitiveness, choosing peace can feel like an act of rebellion. It's a decision to prioritize inner calm over external chaos, to value harmony over discord, and to trust that peace will ultimately lead to better outcomes for all involved. This strength is not about passivity or avoidance, but about actively cultivating a mindset of understanding, patience, and compassion. Choosing peace also requires us to confront our own egos. Conflict is often fueled by our need to be right, to defend our pride, or to assert our dominance. When we choose peace, we must be willing to let go of those ego-driven impulses. This doesn't mean that we back down from our principles or allow ourselves to be mistreated. Rather, it means that we are confident enough in our own self-worth that we don't need to rely on conflict to affirm our value. Choosing peace is an internal shift. It's a decision to rise above the petty battles of the ego and focus on what truly matters: connection, understanding, and mutual respect. Ultimately, choosing peace over conflict is a commitment to living in alignment with our highest values. It's a decision to prioritize love, compassion, and understanding even in the face of adversity. It's about recognizing that conflict is not the only way to address our differences, and that peace is not a sign of weakness, but of strength. When we choose peace, we are choosing to live with intention, to act from a place of wisdom rather than impulse. We are choosing to create a life that is defined not by the battles we fight, but by the harmony we cultivate. The path of non-reaction in choosing peace over conflict is not an easy one, but it is a path of true strength, wisdom, and emotional resilience. By choosing not to react when hurt, we reclaim our power, break the cycle of pain, and cultivate inner peace. Silence, far from being passive, allows us the space to reflect, respond thoughtfully, and act with intention. In moments of provocation, hurt, or misunderstanding, it is the decision to pause, breathe, and seek peace that ultimately leads to stronger relationships, emotional well-being, and a deeper sense of fulfillment.